This is my true story. I spent 40 years building a life with the woman I loved. We raised children, shared dreams, and promised to stay honest with each other until the end. When she passed, I thought I knew everything about her. I cried for weeks, holding on to the belief that our love was perfect. But one day, while cleaning her old closet, I found a small safe buried under boxes. I thought it would hold memories of us. I was wrong. What I found inside changed everything I believed about her, and about our family. Before I tell you, please subscribe and share where you're watching from. I was cleaning her closet on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The house had felt cold ever since she passed, not because of the weather, but because her presence was gone. Every corner still smelled faintly like her perfume. Every folded sweater carried the memory of her touch. I was putting away her things carefully, almost afraid of disturbing them, when my hand brushed against something solid behind a pile of old clothes. It was a small metal safe, dusty, heavy, and hidden deep against the back wall. I froze for a moment, staring at it, wondering why I had never seen it before. The safe was old, scratched at the corners, but it had weight, not just in metal, but in mystery. My wife and I never kept secrets, at least that's what I believed. We shared everything, passwords, bank accounts, even her medical documents when she got sick. So why a safe? Why hide it? My mind raced through possibilities. Maybe it held family jewelry, old photos, or letters from her parents. She was sentimental. She kept cards from our first anniversary for decades. I smiled at the thought of her quietly locking away little treasures from the past. I sat on the floor, touching the surface of the safe. It was cold, and something about it made my stomach twist. I looked for a key, thinking maybe she kept it somewhere nearby. I checked her drawer, the jewelry box, even under the perfume bottles she used every day. Then I found it, a tiny brass key wrapped in tissue, tucked neatly inside an old wallet. My heart pounded harder than I expected as I held it in my hand. It felt wrong, like opening something sacred, yet I couldn't stop myself. When I slid the key into the lock, it turned easily, almost too easily, as if it had been waiting. The click echoed softly in the room, a sound that somehow carried both promise and warning. I took a deep breath, lifted the lid, and stared into the safe. Inside was a stack of envelopes, papers folded neatly, and a few small objects, nothing shiny or valuable at first glance. But what caught my attention was that everything was organized, labeled, and dated. She had taken time to arrange it, as if she wanted someone, maybe me, to find it one day. The top envelope had her handwriting on it, familiar, gentle, but firm. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It said simply, "For you." The paper smelled faintly like her perfume. I felt my throat tighten as I sat down on the floor, surrounded by her clothes, her scent, and now her secrets. I didn't open it yet. I just stared at it for a long moment, fighting back the wave of emotion that came rushing in. I had already said goodbye to her once. I wasn't ready to say it again in a new way. There were other envelopes too, some addressed to our children, others labeled with names I didn't recognize. Beneath them were folders full of receipts, bank slips, and typed pages. I noticed her handwriting marking small notes on the corners. "For later," one said. "Important," said another. My chest felt heavier with every new label I read. This wasn't just a box of memories. It was something bigger, something deliberate. I could feel it in my gut. For a moment, I thought about closing it again, locking it, pretending I never saw it. I could have left the mystery untouched, preserved her image as the woman I loved, flawless and faithful. But curiosity and fear worked together inside me. I had to know. The truth, no matter how painful, was better than lies buried under clothes and dust. As I reached for the first folder, I told myself it was probably harmless. Old business records maybe, or financial papers from the time we were struggling. But deep down, something told me this was different. The way she hid it, the way everything was labeled with care. It didn't feel like protection. It felt like guilt. My heart beat fast as I unfolded the first page. The ink was faded, but her handwriting was clear. My name appeared at the top, followed by numbers, dates, and signatures I didn't recognize. I blinked, trying to understand what I was seeing. Each word seemed heavier than the last. I didn't know it then, but that small act of curiosity, opening that safe, would change everything I believed about my marriage, my family, and the woman I thought I knew. I held the little brass key between my fingers, turning it slowly, feeling the weight of something I didn't yet understand. It was small, almost fragile, but it opened the one thing that had been locked away from me for years, maybe longer than I ever knew. I remember staring at it, thinking how strange it was that such a tiny object could lead to something so big. That key wasn't just metal, it was a line between what I believed and what was real. Between the woman I thought I knew and the truth waiting in the dark corners of her life. When I slid the key into the lock, it turned with almost no effort, as if the safe had been waiting all along for my hand. The click echoed through the room. It wasn't loud, but it felt final, like the sound of something ending. I lifted the lid, and the smell of old paper and dust filled the air. There were envelopes stacked neatly, each sealed carefully, her handwriting looping across every one. Some had my name, others had initials I didn't recognize. Beneath them were thick folders full of papers, bound together with string. For a moment, I didn't move. I just looked at everything inside and felt my throat tighten. There was a strange calmness around it, like she had organized her secrets just as neatly as she organized our life. Everything in its place, hidden in plain sight. My hand shook as I picked up the first envelope. The handwriting was hers. I'd know it anywhere. She always wrote slowly, with care, as though each letter carried meaning. Seeing it again made my heart ache. It reminded me of the love notes she used to leave on the kitchen counter, the grocery lists she'd decorate with little hearts. This time, though, there were no hearts. Just my name written in ink that had faded over the years. I hesitated to open it. Something deep inside me wanted to believe this was nothing. That maybe it was just old paperwork, maybe even love letters she'd kept from me to surprise me later in life. But that hope lasted only a few seconds. My instincts told me otherwise. My wife wasn't careless. She never hid things unless she had a reason. And if this was hidden, that reason couldn't be good. The papers underneath looked official. Bank forms, receipts, contracts. I saw her signature on everyone, written cleanly, confidently. She was always the one handling our finances. I trusted her completely with that. She said I worked too hard to worry about numbers. I believed her. I always did. My world was simple. I earned, she managed, and we lived peacefully. At least, that's what I thought. My chest tightened as I picked up the next key, not a real one, but a figurative one. The first document that held the answers I didn't want to read. My eyes caught my own name printed on a bank header. It looked familiar at first, but then I saw a series of transactions I couldn't recognize. Money withdrawn in large amounts, month after month. Thousands missing. I flipped the page. More withdrawals. My name was on the account, but I had never made those transfers. The air in the room grew heavy. I could hear the clock ticking in the hall, every second louder than the last. I set the paper down and stared at the safe again. It looked innocent, small, but it had just unlocked the first crack in everything I believed about my marriage. My fingers felt numb. My head pounded. I whispered her name under my breath, half hoping she'd answer, half terrified of what else I was about to find. I reached back inside and pulled out more documents. They were tied together with a ribbon, a small red one she must have saved from a gift. It looked delicate, out of place among the heavy truths it held together. I untied it slowly. Underneath, more papers waited, her life in ink and secrets. Each document another key, unlocking a new piece of the puzzle that was my wife. And as I sat there, surrounded by proof of something I couldn't yet understand, I realized that this wasn't just a box of paper. It was a doorway. I had crossed a line I could never go back from. The key had opened more than a safe. It had opened a truth that would soon shatter everything I thought I knew about loyalty, love, and the woman I had built my entire world around. At first, I thought maybe I was misreading the papers. The numbers didn't make sense. The bank statements were clean, organized, but wrong in every possible way. My name was there, my signature was there, but the transactions? I had never made them. Each withdrawal was large, too large for normal spending, and they happened regularly, almost like a schedule. My chest tightened as I traced the dates with my finger. Every single one lined up perfectly with the months she told me we couldn't afford something. When she said, "Money is tight this month," it was because she had taken it. I flipped through the stack faster, my hands trembling. More pages, more withdrawals, thousands of dollars. Gone. Some transfers were made to an account number I didn't recognize. My eyes darted to the top of the page again, reading it carefully, hoping I'd find an explanation. But all I found were her initials written in the corner of one statement, as if to remind herself it was her doing. I sat back and stared at the open safe. My heart felt like it had stopped. I had trusted her completely, never once questioned how she managed our finances, never asked where the extra money went. My wife had always been responsible, at least I thought so. She handled everything from bills to taxes. I worked, I earned, I brought it all home, and she made sure things stayed in order. That was our agreement, our system. It had worked for decades, or so I believed. But now, seeing these papers, I realized that system had only worked for her. I was living a lie built on faith, and she had been using that faith to drain me one transaction at a time. The realization hit hard, not just the money, but the betrayal. The idea that she could look me in the eyes every morning, smile, and still hide this from me. Every dinner we shared, every talk about our future, every promise we made, all of it now felt hollow. I couldn't tell if my hands were shaking from anger or heartbreak. Maybe both. I tried to tell myself there must be a reason. Maybe she was helping someone in need. Maybe she was paying debts I didn't know about. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. But a small voice inside whispered something else. She was hiding from me, not protecting me. I stood up, pacing the room, gripping one of the envelopes in my hand. My knees felt weak. I sat down again and pulled another paper from the pile. It was a receipt for a transfer made to a man's name, one I didn't recognize. The same name appeared on several documents, each with amounts larger than before. My stomach turned. I remembered her once mentioning a friend from work who helped her handle paperwork when I was too busy. The same name. My hands went cold. For a long time, I just sat there staring at the safe. My mind was running wild, but my body couldn't move. I thought about all the nights she told me she had to check some bills, sitting quietly in that same closet, maybe even using that safe, locking it right before joining me in bed. I remembered the way she used to kiss my forehead and say goodnight. Those moments used to mean love. Now, they just felt like part of the disguise. I put everything back into the safe for a moment, closed it, and leaned my head against the door. My heart was heavy, but there was still denial inside me. I didn't want this to be real. She wasn't perfect, but she wasn't cruel. I told myself that over and over. Maybe this was a misunderstanding. Maybe that man's name was a client or a business partner. Maybe she had good intentions. But deep down, the truth was already forming, and I could feel it tightening around me like a noose. I opened the safe again. This time, I noticed another stack of papers underneath the financial ones. Letters, handwritten, folded with care. My name wasn't on those. His was. That's when I knew this wasn't just about money. This was about something much deeper, much more painful. The kind of truth that doesn't just break your heart. It erases the life you thought you had. I pulled the letters out slowly, one by one. Each envelope looked old, yellowed at the edges, but carefully kept. My wife's handwriting filled them, her tone gentle, almost loving. But none of them were addressed to me. They were written to a man named Richard, the same name from the bank transfers. My hands started to tremble as I opened the first one. The words inside weren't business, they weren't friendship. They were intimate. She wrote about her days, her thoughts, how lonely she felt, and how much she missed him. She ended each letter with, "Forever yours." I felt the blood drain from my face as I read the words again and again, unable to believe what I was seeing. Each letter painted a story that I had been blind to for years. She had another life, one that existed quietly beside mine, hidden in plain sight. While I was working late nights to pay bills, she was writing to him. While I was planning family trips, she was planning secret meetings. I felt dizzy. The walls seemed to close in around me. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage suddenly looked different. Every unexplained phone call, every friend from work, every time she said she was visiting her sister, they all made sense now. I went through the next few letters with shaking hands. They dated back almost 15 years. 15 years of lies, of messages written behind my back, of love given to someone else. In one letter, she wrote about how he made her feel alive again. I stopped reading for a moment, my throat tightening. I remembered all the years she told me she was just tired, that age had changed her, that she didn't want intimacy anymore. But now I understood. She wasn't tired of life. She was tired of me. There were photographs, too. Tucked between the papers were pictures of her and him together. Some looked like vacations, others were taken in restaurants, parks, even inside a car I recognized. Our car. The same car I drove her to work in for years. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. She was smiling in every single one. I couldn't remember the last time she smiled at me like that. At that moment, the pain hit harder than anger ever could. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she lived a whole other version of her life while standing right beside me. She had been two people, the woman I thought I knew, and the one in those letters, and somehow she managed to keep them both alive for decades without me suspecting a thing. I looked around the room, her clothes still hanging neatly, her scent still lingering in the air. It felt wrong, all of it. I wanted to tear everything down, to throw those letters into the fire, to erase her from my memory. But I couldn't. I sat on the floor, surrounded by her secrets, too broken to even stand. My heart wanted to hate her, but my love wouldn't let me. Then something else caught my eye. A small notebook at the bottom of the safe. I opened it, and my heart nearly stopped. It wasn't letters this time, but records. Dates, amounts, initials, and short notes. It was a log. Every transaction, every payment, every deposit she made to that man was listed. She had been sending him money for years. Money I earned. Money meant for our family, our children, our future. I put the notebook down and stared at the open safe, feeling empty. The woman I buried, the one I cried for, the one I believed was my partner through every struggle. She had betrayed me in ways I couldn't have imagined. But even through the shock, one thought cut deepest of all. She died carrying this secret, leaving me to find it alone. She never told me, never confessed, never gave me the chance to forgive her while she was still alive. That truth would haunt me longer than her betrayal ever could. I sat there with the notebook in my lap, the weight of it pressing into my knees like a confession made too late. Every page told a story I had never been part of. I traced my fingers across her handwriting, steady and deliberate, even in betrayal. Each line carried proof. My wife had been funding another man's life for years. My hard work, the money I saved for our children, the sacrifices I made to keep our home. All of it had gone to him. The realization hit me like a punch I couldn't defend against. The notes beside each payment were small, almost tender. For the trip, for the car, for his rent. Some even had little hearts drawn beside them. I stared at one entry that said, "He needs me. He always will." Those 5 words replayed in my head over and over until they blurred. I thought about the nights she said she was too tired to talk, too busy to go out, too sick to travel. All the while, she was giving everything I worked for to someone else. I wanted to get angry. I wanted to scream, to break something, to tear those pages apart until nothing was left. But I couldn't. Instead, I felt empty. A kind of emptiness I can't describe. It wasn't just that she cheated. It was that she had built an entire world where I didn't exist. She had lived 2 lives. One with me, quiet and safe, and one with him, passionate and secret. I had been the cover story, the steady background she needed to keep her other life running smoothly. I remembered the last few years before she passed. She was distant, but calm. Sometimes I caught her smiling at her phone. I thought she was just reminiscing or reading something funny. I had no idea those smiles weren't for me. I thought she was tired from illness, but maybe the weight she carried wasn't sickness. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe every time she looked at me, she saw the lie she had buried deeper. I flipped to the last pages. The handwriting grew shaky, the ink lighter. These were from her final months. The entries changed tone, no longer romantic, but fearful. She wrote that he had started demanding more money, that he had threatened to expose her if she stopped. "He says he'll tell my husband everything," she wrote. My chest tightened as I read those words. Suddenly I realized she hadn't just been betraying me. She had been trapped. What started as an affair had turned into blackmail. That truth hit me harder than any of the earlier discoveries. The man she loved, or thought she loved, had used her, used our money, used her guilt. And when she was dying, she couldn't even tell me the truth because she was afraid of shame, afraid I would stop loving her before she left this world. I sat there for a long time, the silence of the house wrapping around me like a blanket I didn't want. I could almost hear her voice in the room, soft and trembling, apologizing for something she never got the chance to confess. I didn't know what to feel anymore. Anger, sorrow, pity. It all mixed together into something heavy and sharp. I looked at the photographs again, and for the first time, I didn't see love in her eyes. I saw fear. Fear of being found out. Fear of losing everything she built with me. Fear of herself. That realization didn't erase the betrayal, but it explained the distance, the tension, the quiet sadness she carried in her last years. I closed the notebook gently and placed it back into the safe. I couldn't bear to destroy it. It wasn't just proof of her deceit. It was a record of her weakness, her humanity. She had made mistakes, terrible ones, but she had also been a victim of her own choices. And now she was gone, leaving me to clean the mess of a truth she never had the courage to face. As I sat there, the clock ticked slowly, each second echoing the finality of what I had learned. My wife was not the woman I thought she was. But she was also not the monster my anger wanted her to be. She was something in between, a person who loved, lied, suffered, and hid behind her silence. The truth was cruel, but it was finally mine to carry. The days after that discovery felt like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the face I had trusted for 40 years, and behind it, the man she gave everything to. The betrayal wasn't just in her words or the money. It was in the quiet moments we shared that now felt fake. Every dinner, every smile, every "I love you" now echoed in my head like a cruel joke I had unknowingly laughed at. I spent hours sitting beside that open safe, reading the documents over and over. My heart broke in new ways each time. It wasn't only about her secret relationship. It was what she took from me in the process. Our savings, the home equity, the business funds, all drained little by little. I started making calls to the bank, pretending to be calm. The numbers matched what I had seen. She had been borrowing money against our assets for years, and because she signed my name on everything, the debt was legally mine now. The shock turned to anger as the reality sank in. I had worked my entire life to make sure she and our children had security. I had gone without vacations, without rest, saving every extra dollar. I believed she was doing the same. Instead, she had been using that money to support another man, a man who didn't even have the decency to earn what he took. She had built a second life with my sweat and my sacrifice. When I checked the loan papers more closely, I saw something that made me sick. Some of them were recent, signed only a year before she died. Even when her health was failing, when I thought she was too weak to leave the house, she was still covering up her mistakes. She was paying him, protecting him, and leaving me to face what she created. I realized she must have known this would all collapse after she passed. Maybe that's why she never told me. She didn't want to see the disappointment in my eyes before she left this world. The financial burden was heavy. The debts were larger than I could have imagined. The banks started calling, asking questions I didn't have answers for. My children began to notice something was wrong. They asked why their mother's jewelry was missing, why I was selling the car, why I seemed distant. I couldn't bring myself to tell them yet. How do you tell your children that the mother they adored had ruined everything? How do you explain that love and deceit can live under the same roof? The more I tried to fix things, the more damage appeared. Her handwriting was on every form, her forged signature perfectly matching mine. She had become good at hiding, at lying. It scared me to think how easy it was for her to deceive the system, and me. I went from disbelief to rage to heartbreak, all within the same day. There were moments I just sat in the living room, staring at her picture on the wall, asking questions I would never get answers to. The emotional damage went deeper than the financial ruin. I started questioning my own judgment. How could I not see it? How could I sleep beside her for decades and not sense the truth? The more I thought about it, the more I realized she must have been living two lives so perfectly balanced that I only ever saw the version she wanted me to see. That thought hurt more than anything else, knowing that the woman I loved was just a role she played when I was in the room. My trust in everything around me began to crumble. I stopped talking to friends, stopped visiting family. Every kind word, every promise from anyone started to sound hollow. It felt like the world had turned on me. I was left holding the wreckage of a life that looked whole from the outside, but was rotten inside all along. Still, even in that pain, part of me missed her. I missed the woman I thought she was. I missed the way she'd hum while cooking, the warmth of her hand when we sat together, the smile that once made me feel safe. The contradiction tore me apart, I hated her for what she did, but I couldn't stop loving the memory of who I believed she was. And that's the kind of damage that doesn't heal. The kind that lives quietly inside you, reminding you every day that love and betrayal can wear the same face. After days of reading, calculating, and searching for reasons that could make sense, something inside me simply gave out. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown. It was quiet, almost peaceful, like my body and mind had agreed they couldn't fight anymore. I remember sitting in the living room, surrounded by piles of papers, receipts, and copies of her handwriting. The light from the window was fading, but I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at nothing. My world had collapsed, and I didn't even have the strength to be angry anymore. The financial pressure started closing in fast. The bank called again, this time more serious. They wanted payments I couldn't afford. They spoke of foreclosure, of court orders, of deadlines that sounded like countdowns to another kind of ending. I looked around the house. Every chair, every photo, every corner had her touch. She had filled this place with warmth once, but now it felt like a museum of lies. I thought about selling it, but even the thought made my chest ache. This wasn't just a house, it was 40 years of my life, and losing it would mean admitting that everything was truly gone. My children tried to help. They came by, confused and scared. When I finally told them the truth, they didn't want to believe me. My daughter cried, saying her mother would never do something like that. My son got angry at me, accused me of lying to protect myself. Watching them defend her hurt more than the betrayal itself. I didn't blame them, though. She had been a good mother, loving, patient, always there for them. She had saved the worst of her lies for me alone. That was her final cruelty. The pressure grew heavier with every day. Letters from creditors started piling up at the door. I stopped opening them. I sold the car, pawned my watch, and even took part-time work just to stay afloat. But no matter what I did, the hole she left only grew deeper. Some nights, I would wake up thinking I heard her voice calling me. Then I'd remember. She wasn't here anymore. What remained was a ghost made of memories, mistakes, and unanswered questions. The guilt started eating away at me too. I blamed myself for being blind, for not noticing the signs. I went over every year of our marriage in my mind, trying to pinpoint the moment she changed, the moment she decided to betray me. But the truth is, I'll never know. Maybe she felt lonely. Maybe she thought she deserved more. Maybe she just lost her way. Whatever the reason, I was the one left carrying the weight of it. I started spending hours walking outside, trying to clear my head. The fresh air helped, but it couldn't heal the hollow feeling inside. People waved to me, smiled, asked how I was, and I lied. I said I was fine because it was easier than explaining that I had lost my wife, my home, my trust, and my peace all at once. There were moments when I considered giving up entirely. I thought about ending it, about leaving quietly the same way she did. But then I'd remember my children. They might hate me now, but I couldn't leave them with another wound. I couldn't let her mistake destroy the rest of our family. So I stayed, even when it hurt to breathe. As the months passed, I began selling more of our belongings. One by one, I let go of everything that tied me to her, her jewelry, her clothes, even her wedding ring. It felt like tearing pieces of myself away, but it was necessary. The more I let go, the lighter I felt. And in that painful emptiness, I began to see something like clarity. She was gone. The woman I loved was gone long before she died. What remained was only her secret, hidden in that safe, waiting for me to find it. And maybe that was her final message to me. That even love built over decades can collapse in seconds if it's not built on truth. That night, I locked the safe again and pushed it back into the closet. I couldn't bear to destroy it, but I also couldn't keep staring at it. It was a coffin for the life I thought I had. And as I turned off the lights and walked out of that room, I realized I wasn't just leaving behind her secret. I was leaving behind the man I used to be. Telling my children was the hardest part. I had rehearsed the words in my head 1,000 times, but nothing could make them sound softer. They sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, unaware that I was about to destroy what little peace we still had. I laid the documents in front of them, the bank statements, the letters, the photographs. My hands trembled as I spoke, explaining everything I'd discovered. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then my daughter stood up and left the room crying, and my son just stared at me with disbelief. They didn't want to accept it. To them, their mother was perfect, kind, caring, selfless. She made their lunches, kissed them goodnight, listened to their problems. They couldn't connect that woman with the one who had taken everything from me. My son accused me of lying at first. He said I must have misunderstood, that there had to be another explanation. I didn't blame him. I would have said the same thing once. But when I handed him the proof, her handwriting, her signature, I watched the realization spread across his face. His lips trembled, and his eyes went cold. That was the moment I knew the damage wasn't just mine anymore. For days after, the house was silent. My children barely spoke to me. They didn't come for dinner, didn't call, didn't visit. I could feel them grieving her all over again, but this time it wasn't death they were mourning. It was the death of who they thought she was. My daughter eventually came back, her eyes red from crying. She told me she couldn't hate her mother no matter what she'd done. I told her she didn't have to. I couldn't hate her either. Hate would have been easier than the emptiness I carried. The scandal spread quietly through our relatives. People whispered. Some pitied me, others judged. They said I should have noticed. They said maybe I drove her to it, maybe she was lonely. Everyone had a theory, a reason, a justification. But none of them had been in our home. None of them had watched her laugh over breakfast while secretly stealing the ground beneath my feet. The shame wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to the whole family. Financially, we suffered together. The debt didn't just touch me, it reached my children too. My son had to cancel his plans to buy a house. My daughter used her savings to help me settle one of the loans. I saw the resentment in their eyes even when they tried to hide it. They wanted to forgive her, but they couldn't. They wanted to help me, but they were angry at the situation. Our family dinners turned into quiet gatherings filled with unspoken pain. The laughter that used to fill our home was replaced with cautious small talk and long silences. Holidays became the worst. Her empty chair felt heavier than ever. No one wanted to put up the decorations she had loved. The traditions she built became reminders of her betrayal. Even the music she used to play made us uncomfortable. My granddaughter once asked me why everyone looked sad when we talked about Grandma. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a child that love and lies can come from the same heart? Over time, the bitterness started to fade, but the trust between us remained cracked. My son apologized one day for doubting me. He said he just couldn't handle losing both parents at once, one to death and one to truth. I told him I understood. We hugged, but even that felt fragile. My daughter still struggles the most. She visits her mother's grave often, but she never brings flowers anymore. She says she talks to her, not to forgive her, but to understand her. I think that's what we're all trying to do. Understand how someone we loved so deeply could hurt us so completely. The truth didn't just change my marriage, it changed the shape of our family. We learned that love isn't always pure, that sometimes the people you trust the most can destroy you without meaning to. I see the caution in my children now, how they second-guess people, how they guard their hearts. And that breaks mine all over again. Because even though my wife's lies ended with her death, their shadow still lives in us. That safe didn't just hold secrets. It held the power to rewrite our story. And when it opened, it took everything with it. After the truth came out, life didn't return to normal. It simply became quieter, emptier, and heavier. Every day was a reminder of what used to be, but nothing felt the same anymore. The walls of the house seemed to echo differently, as if they too knew what had happened. I tried to move on, but the aftermath of betrayal doesn't just fade. It lingers in every memory, in every corner of what once was home. The financial mess took months to untangle. Banks stopped calling only after I sold nearly everything of value. The car, the furniture, even the family piano she loved. All gone. I kept a few things. Our wedding photo, a ring I couldn't bring myself to throw away, and the small safe that started it all. I kept it locked now, not because it held anything, but because it reminded me that even a box full of secrets can teach you more about truth than a lifetime of lies. I spent most days dealing with paperwork and phone calls. Debt collectors didn't care about grief. They didn't care that the person responsible was gone. All they saw was my name on the signature lines. Forged or not, it didn't matter. I could hear the disbelief in their voices when I told them my wife had done it. They didn't believe me either. I became the man who lost everything, not through bad luck or misfortune, but through love. Emotionally, I was just as broken. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up reaching for her side of the bed only to find cold sheets. My mind would wander back to the good years, to the way she used to laugh when I teased her, to the way she cried during old movies. Were those moments real? Or were they part of the act she perfected so well? The line between memory and illusion blurred until I couldn't tell them apart. My children tried to stay strong, but the cracks in our family deepened. My son stopped visiting as often. He said it was too hard to be in that house. My daughter came sometimes, but her eyes carried a sadness that words couldn't hide. She brought groceries, helped me clean, tried to make conversation, but there was always a distance between us. We both knew it wasn't the same. The betrayal had stolen more than money. It had stolen our sense of safety and love itself. Friends drifted away too. Some didn't know what to say, others chose silence. I couldn't blame them. My story made people uncomfortable. It made them question their own lives, their own marriages. I became a cautionary tale, the old man who trusted too much, who didn't see the truth until it was too late. There were times I thought about leaving everything behind, moving to another city, starting over where no one knew me. But I realized running wouldn't erase the past. The past wasn't a place, it was inside me. I had to face it, live with it, and somehow make peace with it. So I stayed. I fixed the house, repaired what I could, not because I wanted to preserve the memories, but because I needed to rebuild myself. Slowly, I began to find purpose again. Helping my granddaughter with school projects, volunteering at the local library, spending mornings walking by the park. These small things didn't heal me, but they reminded me that life still moved forward, even when your heart refuses to. The pain softened, not because it disappeared, but because I learned to carry it differently. I stopped visiting her grave after a while. I had nothing left to say to her. At first, I felt guilty for that. But over time, I understood that forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes, forgiveness means letting go, not for them, but for yourself. In the end, the fallout didn't destroy me completely. It stripped away everything false, leaving only what was real: my resilience, my quiet strength, and my will to survive. I learned that trust is fragile, love can be dangerous, and truth, no matter how painful, is the only thing worth holding on to. And so, I kept going. Not to forget her, but to remind myself that even after betrayal, life still has meaning, if you're strong enough to face it. Time has a strange way of healing and haunting at the same time. The days turned into months, and the months quietly slipped into years. I learned to live with the silence. The house felt too big for one person, but I stayed because leaving would mean running from ghosts that followed me everywhere anyway. Every room carried her scent once, but now it smelled only of dust and old wood. I stopped expecting to hear her voice. The pain dulled, not because it disappeared, but because I got used to carrying it like a second skin. I started finding comfort in routine. Morning walks became my anchor. I'd watch the sunrise, breathe the cold air, and remind myself that I was still alive. The neighbors would wave, some with pity, some with kindness, and I'd nod back. People moved on faster than I did. They forgot her story, our scandal, the whispers. But I couldn't. The betrayal wasn't just something that happened. It was something that became part of who I was. My children slowly came back around. Not all at once, not with ease. My daughter began calling more often. She'd ask how I was eating, if I needed anything, but she never mentioned her mother. My son visited on Sundays, bringing his own kids, trying to restore some sense of normalcy. We avoided the past because every mention of her name brought pain. But one day, while cleaning the garden, he said softly, "Dad, you did your best." It was the first time in years that I felt forgiven for something I never did wrong. Financially, I rebuilt piece by piece. I paid off what I could, settled the rest through small agreements. I took freelance work repairing furniture, something that gave me peace. There was something poetic about taking broken things and giving them shape again. Maybe in some way, I was repairing myself too. I learned to live with less, to want less. Money no longer meant comfort. It reminded me of the lies that destroyed everything. I kept the safe. It sat in the corner of the room, empty but heavy with memory. Sometimes I'd run my fingers over its cold metal surface and think about how a simple object could hold so much power over a life. It didn't scare me anymore. It reminded me of the truth, that even love can have secrets buried deep, waiting to be found. The nights remained quiet. I no longer waited for her ghost to visit in dreams. I began to sleep peacefully, not because the memories faded, but because I made peace with them. She had her reasons, even if I never understood them. Maybe she was lonely. Maybe she was lost. Maybe she thought she was protecting us in some twisted way. I stopped asking why. The answers wouldn't change anything. Sometimes I visit her grave. I don't bring flowers anymore. I just stand there, hands in my pockets, looking at the stone with her name on it. I don't talk to her. There's nothing left to say. I just stand in silence, thinking about the life we had, the love we shared, and the truth that ended it all. I don't cry anymore. I just feel a quiet ache that reminds me I once loved deeply, and that's something no betrayal can take away. Now, I live simply. I wake up early, cook for myself, and read old books. I watch my grandchildren grow and see pieces of her in their smiles. Not the lies, not the pain, but the warmth she once had. Life has a way of finding balance even after chaos. I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing not to let the past poison what's left of your future. I no longer hate her. I no longer love her the way I did. She's just a memory now. One that shaped me, broke me, and rebuilt me in ways I never expected. The safe is still here, closed and silent, a symbol of everything I lost and everything I found again. I survived her secrets. I survived the truth. And in that survival, I found something stronger than love or pain: peace.